Hello, welcome to Jason the Old Millennial. My name is Jason, speaking to you here in my basement in the great state of Kansas. In today's video, I'm continuing my series on ranking my 100 favorite albums of all time. And this time at number 20, we have Mr. Tambourine Man by the Byrds. And came out in 1965 as their debut album. So here are my thoughts here on Jason the Old Millennial. Hello, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well here on a Wednesday late afternoon. Continuing this series, I'm in my top 20 now. So, yeah, it's just getting better and better. These albums are absolutely incredible. Got 60s album, one of my favorite from the 60s period, and my favorite from this band, the Byrds, Mr. Tambourine Man, their debut album. Also, obviously, named it after their most popular song that they came out at the time. Mr. Tambourine Man, which is, of course, a cover song from the great Bob Dylan. One of the best cover songs of all time, I'd have to say. And the Byrds really got this reputation of being a major covers band. They did write some of their own material, but they did love covering other songs, especially Bob Dylan. They covered two of his on this album, in fact, along with Mr. Tambourine Man. You also got All I Really Want to Do, another really good cover, actually, on the album. Coming off of an album I've talked about before, Another Side of Bob Dylan. But yeah, and the Byrds are so good because of of course, if you know anything about the Byrds, you know they have incredible harmonies, and that's what really elevates them as one of my favorite bands of this time period. And it's what makes it so good when they take a cover song. They take a song like Mr. Tambourine Man, which is a good Bob Dylan song, and I think it's even better when they take over because they can take in those, Bob Dylan's not the greatest singer in the world. Great songwriter, of course, and all that. But then the Byrds bring in all those kind of three-part harmony, or three main guys, really, that harmonize really well together and make it sound absolutely incredible. It's one of my favorite songs of the 60s period, for sure, and obviously it's very popular. The song itself, Mr. Tambourine Man, went #1 in the US and the UK, and that's where they kind of built this album like a lot of 60s band did. You come out with a #1 hit, and then you build an album around it. And so that was definitely a case here from Tambourine Man. It is their first album, debut album here. And if you know anything about the Byrds, a band that, yeah, like I said, I really enjoy. It's a band I need to do a deep dive on at some point. My friends Nick and Briar have been going through all the albums on Nick's channel, Townsend, I think 909. And they've been doing a lot of great work. They're almost done with their discography, anyways, of the Byrds. Which interesting discography because the way they turn out, the way they start with this original band, turns out very different later on. But basically, it started by Roger McGuinn and Gene Clark, and then David Crosby also coming in. Really started with Roger McGuinn and Gene Clark were in California as folk singers. And then they joined to make like a duo folk group, basically, kind of like, an Everly Brothers or whatever style at the time. And then the Beatles hit, of course, in 1964. The Beatles came huge in America. And once they heard the Beatles, they kind of changed their style from folks to adding a little more rock to it. They definitely added the Rickenbacker electric guitars, which the Beatles had at the time. And the Rickenbackers are known for their for their sound. I forget now what it's called, but yeah, they have a certain sound to it that really kind of stands out, anyways. And so the Byrds kind of took after the Beatles on that way, getting the Rickenbackers and all that. And so it's kind of a combination of they took the folk music that they really loved, like Bob Dylan, they really loved, and then they took the Beatles and the British invasion that was coming in. And so they took the folk music, the rock music, combined together, and we invent a whole new genre, basically, which is folk rock, which would come huge in America. A lot of bands would kind of turn to folk rock music in America, kind of the battle of the British invasion. All these British rock bands were coming to America and getting huge, and the Americans were like, hey, we're good too. And they started the kind of folk rock genre, which, yeah, very, very popular. One of my favorite genres of all time, and definitely during the 60s period kind of is where folk rock really excels, anyways. And so this is a very monumental album just because of the fact that started one of the most popular rock genres of all time, the folk rock genre, which is kind of interesting. And obviously, so Roger McGuinn and Gene Clark, which big shout out to Gene Clark because he lived in Kansas. He was born in Missouri. He lived in Kansas. He went to high school in Bonner Springs, Kansas, which is only like 30 minutes, 25 minutes from where I live right now in Leavenworth. And so I've driven by there many times. So it's like kind of cool that there's like to me, Gene Clark, a celebrity that, went to school not too far from here. But then he went to California, and he didn't really do much with Kansas after he went to California, and kind of tried to make it big as a, folk singer and join different bands and all that. But definitely I still feel like, Gene Clark is a Kansan in heart. And so I as a Kansan, I really like Gene Clark because of that. And even read his biography on him, I think called The Tambourine Man or something like that, because he was actually the guy who would bang the tambourine in the band. Anyway, so it's kind of interesting. He actually started out he was a guitar player, actually. He played the rhythm guitar, basically. And Roger McGuinn was the lead guitar. Roger McGuinn, really good guitar player. In fact, I mean, you really owe a lot to him for arranging the music. He was really one that came up with the opening to Mr. Tambourine Man, which is absolutely amazing. And the guitar on there is great, and really made that song stand out, and what makes us different than even the original, where Bob Dylan even, I think, started playing the song differently after the Byrds kind of took it and arranged it a little bit different. Anyways, but yeah, that's kind of started. They were starting as a duo. Dave Crosby kind of forced himself into the group, it feels like, from what I've read. He heard them singing and was like, started joining in, and was like, hey, I need to be part of this group. I think we sounded good together. And they were a little hesitant, of course, because we know Dave Crosby. He was definitely, a wild, individual and had a bad reputation. He was actually an actor in California. Gene Clark from Kansas, Roger McGuinn, I forget where he's from, somewhere else, but they both moved to California to start music. And Crosby was already in California because his dad was a famous cinematographer, and actually an Oscar-winning cinematographer in Hollywood. So Crosby was actually around the Hollywood people, and he was actually taking acting classes, and he was, I think, maybe being an actor. But then he started singing with Roger McGuinn and Gene Clark, and so they kind of started a trio that they would sing at. And Crosby knew some people, so he was able to get the group. They were called something else. They weren't called the Byrds yet, but he got them into. He knew somebody who owned like a recording studio or something like that, and was able to get them to record some music. And Gene Clark was really the main songwriter. He was a pretty good songwriter, actually, and he was writing a lot of songs, and a good singer too. I think Gene Clark was the best singer and songwriter out of the group. And that's what makes this album so good, I think, is that we got Gene Clark here, because Gene Clark would, they would do Turn, 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 the next album, and then Gene Clark basically left the group after that. And I never thought the Byrds were as good without Gene Clark. I thought he was really the best, like I said, real big talent. I mean, Roger McGuinn definitely was a big talent. Crosby definitely went on to do great stuff, but I think they missed something without Gene Clark. Anyways, so they then of course they were doing songs, and they came up with this Mr. Tambourine Man version, which took off. And so then they got a manager who then added a bass player and a drummer, and then they renamed themselves the Byrds. And so then they started recording this album, 1965, Mr. Tambourine Man, anyways. And it went number 6 in the US and number 7 in the UK, so top 10. Surprised it didn't go number 1. I mean, such a great album. Number 20 on my list. The two big singles, like I said, Mr. Tambourine Man, number 1. That's really the huge hit that really started them off and got them famous. And then All I Really Want to Do was a top 10 hit as well. Really great original from Gene Clark, and Gene Clark lead sings on that. Roger McGuinn lead sings on Mr. Tambourine Man. So they both kind of take turns really lead singing stuff. And Crosby's just a really great, harmonizer, of course, as we've seen with, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young and all that. And interesting, like when they first started, Crosby, they tried to get him to play, because they originally they had Clark, who was the rhythm guitar, McGuinn the lead guitar, and they gave Crosby the bass. He had to learn to play the bass or whatever. he was a guitar player, but they felt like they already had two guitar players. Anyways, and Crosby didn't like playing the bass, and he even said that he had a hard time playing the bass and singing at the same time. So he kind of bullied Clark out of the guitar and basically forced him to give up the guitar. And so they switched, and Crosby took up the rhythm guitar, and Clark didn't have an instrument at all. That's why sometimes he's usually banging the tambourine or something like that, or he's lead singing, of course, sometimes, but he's kind of out there with no instrument a lot of times anyways. And that's where we get the original kind of Byrds band, and my favorite version of the band. This and Turn, 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 to me, I really enjoy those two albums. Interesting, I see a lot of people ranking albums, and like I said, this is my favorite album. Turn, Turn, Turn is my second favorite album from the Byrds, but when anytime I see people ranking the Byrd albums, they usually rank these two albums low on the list, which I'm always shocked, because I think this is an absolutely amazing album. First time I heard it, I was like, wow, blown away by the harmonies, are just absolutely incredible. Throughout, I said some covers, some originals, but like I say, Mr. Tambourine Man, I feel a lot better. The first two songs, I mean, incredible 1-2 songs on the list. I mean, and I feel a whole lot better. It's not a song I was familiar with until I heard the album, and I was like, wow, this is such a good song. I'm surprised it's not bigger known, at least with me. But like I said, The Bells of Rhymney, amazing. All I Really Want to Do, another good cover song from Bob Dylan. And Chimes of Freedom, some of my highlights. But there's not a bad song on here, just because the harmonies are so good that every song just sounds great with the way they sound. And that's why I really put it this high up, because every song I really, really enjoy. Plus, he got some of the best, like Mr. Tambourine Man, one of the great songs in the 60s in here. So that's why it's number 20 on my list. So with that, go with the top three. The first two are pretty easy. The number three is kind of hard, because there's definitely a couple of songs that could fit on there. I went with The Bells of Rhymney, I believe it's called. Yeah, really nice. Again, just nice song, nice harmonies in there. Yeah, just a great sounding song. I mean, Chimes of Freedom and All I Really Want to Do come very close to getting to the top three. In fact, I can go back and forth between those three songs in my top three. All three really good, but definitely number two is I'll Feel a Whole Lot Better. Man, it sounds so great. I love Gene Clark's voice here. And then the backing vocals are absolutely incredible as well. But I love the whole idea of the song is, wanting to leave this girl and saying, I'll feel a whole lot better once you're gone. It's kind of the whole chorus, And one part he even says like something like, I think I'll feel a whole lot better when you're gone. Like he's not even sure at some points in the song, but he's pretty sure. And I like the song because it reminds me of, I've been in bad relationships where I broke up the relationship and I felt a lot better afterwards. Like sometimes breaking up with somebody is very sad and it's upsetting and all that. And then there's been one or two times where I actually felt better. I was like, oh, the weight lifted off of me. I don't have to deal with this person anymore. They were just terrible. They treated me terrible, and I'm better off without them anyway. So that's why I like the kind of idea behind the song as well, as just a really nice, catchy song. Gene Clark's really singing great on here. Like I said, I wish I could hear more Gene Clark and the Byrds. It feels like we got just a limited number of songs from him, unfortunately. And then number one is obviously Mr. Tambourine Man. I mean, how could it not be? It's hard. It's between this and Turn, Turn, Turn is my favorite Byrd song. They both are just absolutely amazing songs and some of the best of the 60s period. I might go with this, my favorite Byrd song of all time. But man, when they go to the, hey, Mr. Tambourine Man, put us on. I mean, the vocals are so amazing. And love Roger McGuinn's guitar in here. And just a great Bob Dylan song that they make even better. I don't get the lyrics. The lyrics are a little strange, but man, it's a great sounding song. And that's my number one, Mr. Tambourine Man. If you haven't heard it, I mean, if you know music, I'm sure you heard this song. And it's one of the classics. But definitely check all the other songs out. And check this album out. It's an incredible 60s album. One of my favorite from the 60s period. One of the best debut albums, in my opinion, as well. So that's my thoughts here. Number 20, Mr. Tambourine Man. Please comment, what do you think about this album? You've heard this album. What do you think about the Byrds? All that. Love to hear your comments. What are your favorite songs from this album, maybe as well? I appreciate all that anyways. And just, I'm happy to get into my top 20 and hopefully try to get through this fairly quickly, as I've been working on this list for such a long time. But just thank you for anybody that's watched any of these videos. I really appreciate anybody watching me give my opinion on these things. and I appreciate you liking it. That really helps me out. And a big thanks to all of my subscribers. I gained a couple subscribers lately. I think I'm like at 235 or something. I don't know. So not a lot, but I appreciate all the new subscribers. Any subscriber I appreciate. So thank you to all of you to subscribing to the channel. Hopefully I bring some good content here and you enjoy some stuff I say and all that. So yeah, thank you, and I hope you have a great day.